Hello, my name is Adrian Stevens, and today I'm going to talk to you about the SSD1306 display drivers. And these are drivers that are used to control OLED or organic LED displays. And I've got a couple of examples here. The larger one is a single color 128 by 64 pixel display, and then the other one is also single color and it's 128 by 32. Now, there are some other sizes. I believe there's a 96 by 64, but these two are the most common, and they're fairly readily available in places like Amazon, eBay, etc., and they're relatively low cost, especially when compared to other displays. And today we're going to control these using a Netduino 3 Wi-Fi. And let's start by mounting the display wired up to a Netduino 3. And I fortunately have one right here with me, and I've done a little bit of wiring to make this quick, and I'm going to mount this on our prototype board, our breadboard. And notice we're only using 4 wires, and there's only 4 pins on these displays. Now, the gray wire here, this is our ground, and then the orange here is our power. This is 3.3 volts coming from the Netduino itself. And then we've got these 2 white wires, and these are connected to the I2C bus, and those are on the top 2 pins here. But you'll notice it's where it says SC and SD, that's actually the I2C bus pins. So with our display wired up, let's switch over to Visual Studio 2015 and write some code. I've got an existing project open, and this is more or less a bare bones empty project with just a couple of little helpers in place, as we'll see. And the first thing we would do to control the SSD1306 display is add a couple of NuGet packages. Let's take a look at what we have here. I'm going to right click on the project, manage NuGet packages, and let's see what's installed. So I have the Netduino.Foundation NuGet package, and this is a really handy NuGet package that gives you drivers for all kinds of peripherals, and you'll use this most of the time when you're interacting with hardware. Now for displays, you're going to add a couple of extra packages as well. Let's search for Netduino.Foundation displays, and notice we have a unique package for the SSD1306. This is just compartmentalized, so we're not pulling in drivers and code that we're not using. So when you need this driver, bring it in. And we're also going to use a companion package called Netduino.Foundation Graphics Library, and this helps us draw to the screen. Now, full disclosure, I'm not going to add these 2 NuGet packages to my project. I'm using pre-release code, and there's a couple of things in my code that I want to show you today. But this will be published very soon, and very likely by the time you watch this video, the code changes I have will be published in these packages. So again, grab Netduino.Foundation, Netduino.Foundation Graphics Library, and Netduino.Foundation SSD1306. So over to our code, the first thing we want to do is create, an instance of the object that represents our display. So I'm going to type in static SSD1306, and let's call this the OLED display. Now the pattern I like to use is to put all of my hardware initialization into the initialize method. And you notice here we've got a little bit of code already, and this is just to wire up the button that's built into the Netduino, and we can use that. And let's add in the code to initialize our display. So I'm going to say OLED display equals new SSD1306. And the first thing we do is we put in the address. This is the address for the I2C bus. Now these displays are almost always on 0C3, or sorry, 3C I should say. Sometimes, or alternatively, they can be on 03D. If you're unsure, start with C. Next is the speed. Defaults are fine, 400. And then the display type. Now we have 2 built in right now. We've got the 128 by 32, which is what we're using. The larger display you saw earlier was the 64. And I mentioned there's also a 96 by 64, and we'll get that driver added shortly. So there we go, that's all we need to initialize the display, and then good practice is to also clear that display as well. And notice this method takes a boolean, whether you want to update the display right away, and I'm going to say yes, and that'll just clear out so there's no noise on the built-in buffer. Now I could run this now, but that's not very interesting. Let's have it do a little bit of work. So back to my main method, after we call initialize, we can use our OLED display instance here, our object, and we're going to use the draw pixel method. Now this wouldn't be very interesting, draw a single pixel. Let's just do a quick loop. So go for int I equals 0, I is less than, I don't know, let's do 7, I plus plus. And then, so the first parameter is x, I'm going to use I. Next parameter is Y. And then bool color. That's is it on or is it off? It's a single color display, so we're going to have that lit up. We do one last thing before we run. On the OLED display instance, we're going to call the show method. And what that does, that tells the display to write anything in the buffer onto the screen. In this case, our 7 pixels. So let's run this and see how this looks. And there we go. You can see on the display we have a little diagonal line. Now this is great, but obviously drawing things 1 pixel at a time is going to be fairly cumbersome. And so we actually have a helper class that we're going to use to help draw some more interesting things. And that is the graphics library. And I can call this OLED graphics. Now let's go back to our initialize method and let's instantiate our graphics library as well. OLED graphics equals new graphics library. Now notice what this takes. It takes a display base, and that's the base class for our display class. So we can just pass in our OLED display. And so now we can use this OLED graphics instance to control the display. Let's go back up to our main method. Let's get rid of our single pixels here, and let's draw something a little bit more interesting. So now we can use OLED graphics, and let's draw a rectangle. So let's put this, we'll put, I don't know, 5 pixels in. I put this down at 18. Let's get a width of, say, 30, a height of 10. I want this lit up, and let's make this filled as well. I'll make that 30, not 300. And let's do one more as well. So OLED graphics, let's draw a circle. And let's move this over past the rectangle. So say put this at 50. Center for the Y, let's say we'll put that at, oh, I don't know, 22. And we'll give it a radius of 6. And again, colored. And I'll leave this one unfilled. And the last thing we do is, again, tell our display to update. Now we can do this directly from the graphics class to the graphics library. And for this, we just call show. Now the nice thing about using the graphics library is for any display you're using on the Netduino, you're going to use the graphics library and then use the exact same set of commands. So this common API surface for any display type. So let's run this. And there we see we've got our rectangle and our circle. And the last thing I want to show you is drawing text. So let's make this a little bit more interactive as well. So to draw text, we need a font. Let's go back to our initialize method, and I can go var font, and I'm going to use an 8 by 12 font, and this is 8 by 12 pixels. And to that, I'm going to new up the font 8 by 12. Now this is not in the current NuGet package, so I'm using the preview code, but it will be very shortly. It's a larger font than what's currently available. The 8 by 8 is already there. Now we create our font, and what we need to do is set this on our graphics library instance. So I'm going to OLED graphics, and current font equals, let's do our font 8 by 12. And that's it. And now we can draw text to screen. So let's go back up to our main method where we're doing our drawing. OLED. And actually, let's make this more interesting. Instead of drawing here, I'm going to do this in the button click event handler. And we're going to do a very, very nice, simple hello world style demonstration here. Let's just go OLED graphics, draw text. Now the font's been set, so we don't set that again. And then we set the location. This is going to go right at 0 for X. Y can be right at the top of the screen. Put 2. And let's give it some text. So we'll say count is, and I actually have a count variable already. Let's do plus plus count. Before I forget, I also need to tell the display to update. So OLED graphics. And we'll call show again. And let's deploy it to Netduino. And again, we see our rectangle and our circle. And let's push the button. And we see our count. And it increases every time we push the button. And so you've seen the basics of controlling a display with the Netduino, and these SSD1306 displays are pretty fantastic, really great brightness, but of course we can do more complicated things, and we can use them in more complicated builds as well. And here's a fun project where we've got a simple Pong game. Of course, completely visualized on the SSD1306.